If you are watching right now, welcome to Being in the Middle with a dear friend of mine and former colleague, Joi Podgorny. Hi, Joy. And this is going to be another hard one. Every time we have these lives, I say to you, it's going to be hard because I go down memory lane with my friends. Joy and I used to work together. We met in Chicago during the Chicago Interactive Marketing Association days and other tech days of Chicago. And you grew up near Chicago, right?
Yeah, in Chicago, and then I spent quite a few adult years and downtown. Well, downtown to people who don't live in Chicago, to other people, Ukrainian Village, Wicker Park.
And now you live on a mountaintop.
Now we bought 6 acres on the top of a mountain right outside of Rocky Mountain National Park in Estes Park in Colorado, and we are living that homesteader dream, which is hilarious because I am an urban girl, and my husband is a mountain man. Um, he gets to do all his fun mountain man adventures in his brain, and then I get an international airport that's only a couple hours away, so I get to go wherever I want to. So
And before this, you were in Utah.
I was in Utah for a while. Actually, I was in Utah for 10 years. As we'll probably get to, I was in video games for a while, and I worked at a small studio out there. And then during the pandemic, I did a little retreat out into California. So I was in LA for a year, and then I was in San Jose for a couple of years, until we bought this place out here. So I've been kind of all over the place.
Now, Joy and I, obviously, we also worked together at some point at a company called Mod Squad that was all about global digital communities, moderation, customer support. Hi, Izzy, if you're watching. Joy has been someone who's always been in my life because obviously she's kind of another nerd. She's actually nerdier than I am because she's this amazing University of Chicago grad and a math whiz. And whenever we talk about technology and trends, Joy, we always somehow brought it back to Gen X. So I find it comical that there's so much Gen X, out in the world about Gen Xers. I don't think enough, but you and I have always talked about whether it's finances, career, experiences being Gen Xers. So what are your thoughts before we kind of get into the digital nitty gritty, especially about communities and your background with kids, video entertainment? What are your thoughts right now on the Gen X thread and the conversation about Gen X, what we need, who we are? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's I've worked in kids and family brands for decades now, and so I've always kind of presented as a millennial before we called them millennials, before we called them Gen Y and all the different things. I think I was at one of the conferences where they debuted the whole generational obsession that we started having for the next like 2 decades. I've only recently, and it's probably just because I'm getting older, but I've only recently started like actually identifying with some of the stuff that's coming out with Gen X. When you and I used to talk about it, I think we coined it cuspers. We were saying we were cuspers because we were right on the
Yes.
edge of
Yes.
millennial and Gen X. And I think because we were so tech forward in our career and in our, hobbies and stuff, we always felt like the younger generation because whenever they painted out Gen Xers, it was always this like kind of dowdy and a little bit clueless,
Yeah.
like didn't know what they were doing. And that has never been me. I have always known everything that's going on with tech. I'm teaching all of my friends who are, 5 years younger than me, the new Chapel Roan dances. Like I'm the one who's like keeping everybody up to date on all the trends. And it's just because it's what I do for my career. It's also what I dig. So that's why I do it for my career. I like some of the Gen X stuff that I think that I engage with now that's coming out is people kind of, I don't like the negative stuff. I don't like it when we post the different generations against each other. But I'm engaging with obviously some of the nostalgia content of people kind of talking about the media that we consumed when we were younger and the stuff that that will resonate with us because we were kids being babysat by the TV and know those kind of media references. But also, unfortunately, I am engaging with a lot of my peers who are my age and even a little bit younger than me, having a hard time in the job market. And,
Mm.
um, and kind of hitting their heads up against the wall about the way that they got jobs in the past doesn't work anymore. Even the
100%.
dust off my resume and like let me make sure that I'm applying to all these places, and I'm like, dude, you're not going to get a job if you're applying. You need to call your friends, reach into that network, re-engage with someone, start asking about their kids, and find out if they got anything. They have a referral program at their company that they're at right now, because especially with those of us who are a little bit on the older end. And I'm not, I mean, like, we're not even on the older end of the working generation. There's still young boomers out there who are going through the
Dude,
same
yeah.
thing that we're going through. But you can't apply for a job anymore. The MIT status that it needs to understand how to algorithmically make your resume work with the AI readers, I
I
don't
have
even
to
know how people do it.
I have to pause you on that. Real quick. Izzy says hello. Izzy's just commented. Well, look at these marvelous humans. Hi, Izzy.
I
We used to work with Izzy. I met Mod Squad. She's still there doing awesome stuff. The Joy, I know someone legit 100% who paid someone to AIify their resume and LinkedIn. Guess how much it cost? Guess how much?
I don't know, a couple hundred.
$1,500.
God. And then I talked to someone else who is one of my colleagues who's a CEO, and was also kind of like flabbergasted by what we have to go through right now. He was saying that he talked to someone who had 3 different resumes that they had to put together. One for the AI bots that are reading and scanning the resumes, one for the hiring manager, and then one for the team that was actually doing the interview with you, which is like, that's a part-time job right there. Just like managing all those. Plus you got to do cover letters. Plus you got to get ready for the interviews. Like, that's exhausting to just think about. I just watched the episode of Bear last night where Tina went,
Wait, wait.
spoiler alert. It's no big spoiler. It's not a
Oh,
spoiler at all. But
oh okay. I'm just on episode 3. Hold on. Okay.
yeah. But it's an episode where she's like interviewing for jobs, and it is like, you feel it. Like, you feel like the interview. Like, obviously, I'm not giving away anything. Everyone should watch it, but especially since I got the Chicago family dynamic that they hit right
Isn't
on the
that
nail.
so? Isn't that? I mean, these talks go to different places, but at some point we need to get back to that, because even though I'm from Detroit, that ethnic Italian, I've been in enough Southside Polish, Southside Italian, Southside Irish houses in Chicago proper, and close to Chicago south suburbs, like Jenny McCarthyville. For those who don't know, Jenny McCarthy's from a Chicago southern suburb. It's that. But I want to talk about this job thing since you talked about it, because again, I don't think people will realize what your career is. You're in your 40s. You've done all of these things, especially when it comes to kids, community safety. You've worked in Europe, you've lived in Europe. And I think that a lot of people, depending on C-suite positions, executive positions, companies, even 32-year-olds at that companies, those companies have no idea what someone like you has done. And I'm coming across more Gen Xers, to your point, the cuspers, our age, who have done so much and are still not just keeping up with trends, helping set the trends, but there is this interesting air that I'm finding. Going back to your AI and HR representatives and people ops will tell you that good people get passed up because they're not getting past the bots, which, let's go back to our logic that you and I share. A, that's a problem. Is anyone fixing it? No. But the next piece is, I think folks are still surprised to see that young Gen Xers and cuspers have done all of the things and still keeping up with the trends. It's this weird dynamic that I've experienced when I'm out and about, especially, I love, as you know, my EVs and tech and whatnot. When I meet a young 30 something who works within technology and we just start riffing about things, there's this assumption that I have no idea what I'm talking about. Or when I say, yeah, Orbitz, I was there when it launched. There's this, I don't know what that is. And then I don't understand the hiring managers and the positions of hiring managers who might be our age or older are missing that. I'm really enthralled by that trend I'm hearing from friends who are out looking, to your point, not working for themselves. And there's a delta. Why do you think there's that delta right now of surprise? I've done all this.
Well, I think it's because we've been taught societally for, and then there's like subgroups that have been taught it even more, to kind of downplay and don't brag about yourself, and
Mm,
don't have that confidence. And it went into parenting whenever. So I've done a lot of kids gaming and a kids entertainment brands in my career, and every time I was at any kind of conference speaking, I'd always have someone being like, um, how do I protect my kids online? I'm like, first thing is play the games that they're doing, like know what they're doing, like understand what's happening with what your kids are consuming, like so you can like be one-on-one with what they're doing. And you don't ever want to be the person who doesn't know, like you don't want to be like, oh god, I don't understand what these kids are
I
doing.
can't keep up. All these crazy
Yeah,
kids.
first of all, you sound dumb, and I know you don't want to
Totally.
sound dumb. No one ever wants to sound dumb. So stop saying that if that's what you're doing. But second of all, like you're downplaying yourself. And like we just got used to this like weird, like, don't brag about yourself kind of thing. And I mean, like, it sounds silly, but like having an air, like when a couple of my phrases that I always say is extroversion pays better. I consider myself an introvert, but extroversion pays better, and humility will get you nowhere in this career
Oh,
landscape.
yes.
And
Yes.
like so, and then you sound like kind of a dick. You sound like like an '80s like Wolf of Wall Street person, and that is definitely not me. But like it's true though. Like we have to talk about it. But then we have to get back to how to frame your career. Another phrase that I say, and this is going to be just like the Joy catchphrase show apparently, my
I love it.
yeah, like I rewrite my narrative constantly. I'm constantly rewriting it, and because I have ADHD when it comes to life. I love constant things happening. I love like
Hmm.
changing things. I love the fact that one of the benefits of being in tech and being tech adjacent for my entire career is that there isn't this expectation that I need to stay at a place for 10 years in order to stay relevant or anything like that. Like I can hop around, like I can be here for a year, I can be here for 3 years, I can be here for a year and a half. And because of that, I've gained like really cool experiences. So I have this like really amazing career tapestry that I've been able to put together for myself. But how do you talk about that? How do you sit down and be like, okay, let's go over the last 20 years of 1 to 2 year
Hmm.
experiences each and like explain to you. One funny thing that happened to me when I was at one of my previous roles 2 years ago is I it was pandemic time. So we're doing like a Zoom kind of get to know your coworkers sort of thing. And I think we were paint by number sewing or something. It was some crafty thing that we were doing, and just casually someone brought up um, one of the games that I worked on in the early 2000s, like casually brought it up,
Wow.
and it was one of the late 20 somethings, like one of the Gen Zers. And so I casually said, I worked on that. And they're like, what do you mean you worked on that? I'm like, yeah, I launched that game and I brought it up to, 10 million, 100 million players playing. And they're like, what? And then like took on this like deity status for the next couple of weeks where they're like, do you know that she worked on this game? Do you know that she worked in this game? Oh
Can
my
you
God.
name the game?
Um, well, one of the big games that I get that a lot with is National Geographic's Animal Jam. I worked on that one for
Hmm.
a while, and that was a big one. But I worked on Oregon Trails revamp, Where in the World is Carmen San Diego. I worked on highlights. I'm like, there's like a bunch of brands that I don't even talk about on my resume or anything like that I worked on as a consultant, where I was brought in because I was an expert in kids online safety and kids trends and kind of engagement and gamification for kids, making sure that they were going to be engaging, and then also having like a parallel parent track and making sure the parents had the communication that they needed. And so that was like really big in the late aughts. And so like I've been on like a bazillion different brands that are like heritage brands that everybody grew up with. And when I like casually mention it, people are like, oh my God. So I think as Gen Xers, to bring it back to the original question, we need to think about how to reframe our narrative so that we're not bragging and we're uncomfortable with the bragging thing, but we are kind of like showcasing our talents, our experience, some of the razzle dazzle, because like Lord knows we all have that, especially those of us who
Mm-hmm.
different parts of tech. I mean, I mean, like, I love seeing when you get to brag about your Hemming and you get to brag about, like all the different, I mean, this is what, how many podcast series have you started? How many video series have you
I don't
started? And how many amazing people have you been able to talk
I, I
to?
think I think that's why you and I share that. I love a couple of things you said, tech adjacent, and ADHD when it comes to the tech, because there are so many new things that are being made, and you can't help but like to tinker. It's just there's so many things to learn and do. And when you said earlier that you were part of the crew that built everything, I also don't think people understand what that also meant early on, because we talk about startups, we talk about startup culture, and I can't help half the time to LOL or giggle to myself because I don't want to say back in my day. However, there is something to be said for not sleeping, eating ramen, sleeping at your desk, because that's what you did in startup culture, and whatever startup culture it was, whether it's gaming or you're on the other side of the world living in London. And
Yeah.
I think I love that you said reframe the narrative and tell the story about how do you go through a couple of decades of what you've done. I mean, thank you for the kudos, but I'm not going to lie, it's hard. It's hard when so for example, the Olympics are coming up in Paris, which of course I'm like, I wish I could go, because can you imagine the opening ceremony on the Seine and like eating a croissant and watching it all happen? I was with some of my daughter and some distant relatives. We were just hanging out talking, and then I worked on the Chicago Olympic bid for the Winter Olympics. Of course, they lost because of the drama with Brazil, which we know totally
Mm.
a fix, but I was pregnant with my first at the time. And so with the people we were talking with, they went, wait, what? And I said, yeah. And actually, I worked with the gentleman. Hey, Mark, kudos. So Mark Minton, who used to be the head of brand work for the Olympic bid, is now a great movie producer. And if you've seen this season of The Bear, one of the scenes, Carmi is sleeping in John Mulvaney's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
It's really my friend Mark's apartment in Chicago.
Love it.
So I mentioned that to my daughter. She's like, what? And I said, yeah, well, I knew Mr. Minton because we worked together on this thing when I was pregnant with you. And it's just to your point, it's really hard to bring up 2 decades of work that you've done, because it's connected. The threads are connected to what you're doing now, because I would also argue you're a phenomenal gaming expert, kid safety expert. Because I also want to talk about your experience at conferences. I want to talk about Gamergate, even though it's old. I want to talk about that with social media. What we'll talk about after that is you're also phenomenal at business ops.
It's
I have not met someone who is so just like a machine when it comes to business ops, running a biz, soup to nuts, running a flow of a team. Do you see that as an interesting? If you've seen the Jiminy Glick videos happening around the web right now,
I
I feel
love.
like going into Jimmy Glick, not Jiminy Glick, but Jimmy Glick. It's a Martin Short character, but I won't. I've been watching a lot of him in his interviews. How do you feel? No. How do
I'm
you feel going with the ability to do both business ops, which is kind of one brain, and then on the other side, creativity, video gaming? Do you find it a struggle to sometimes go back and forth because you're so good at both? I'm not saying this as a friend. I'm saying this as an observer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ops is what I love. I love systems. One of the funny jokes of one of my first days with my, husband was we were chatting and he's a mechanical engineer and we were chatting and when he goes back to think about it, he was just like, well, I knew I was either going to be with you or I was going to recommend you as a systems engineer at our manufacturing plant that I work at, because either way, like I was either going to date you
Wow.
or work with you. And I was just like, I like that. I think other people might be offended by that. I thought that was nice. But I love ops. One of actually the focuses right now, when I do speak, or we have our conference coming up, TrustCon, in the trust and safety world. Trust and safety has had a lot of names over the last couple decades. It's been online community, it's been kid safety, it's been digital citizenship, it's been content moderation, it's been policy. But right now, trust and safety is having its day in the sun. And so at TrustCon, I think the thing that I'm going to probably talk the most about is just how do we help the ops people of it? We're finally getting a lot of people focusing on the policy and the regulations and like how to make sure that you're in compliance with the regulations and things like that. But when it comes down to it, if the executives and the board of your company are not willing to invest in the operations that it needs, if you're only hiring one person to do the job of five, your project's not going to work. And my operational superpower has been taken advantage of many times in my career, oftentimes
Mm,
because of me, because I let it be taken advantage of, because
yep.
I like feeling useful, and I like when people are like, you're so good at that. I'm like, I am. And I just, get the dopamine hit from like feeling that I'm good at it. And then all of a sudden I
Yeah.
see myself running 4 departments and I'm like, yeah, I see what you did again. And I let you do it again to me. And I'm running 4 departments just for that. And that's frustrating. But I love operations. Um, Specifically I've been doing a lot in the gaming world. I just did a small stint in the publishing world. I kind of started my career in kids publishing, um, and then taking those kids publishing stories and turning them into interactive kind of playgrounds, chat rooms, and kind of games and stuff like that. And so it was interesting, kind of full circle, to come back to it and be working with news publishers on the web and helping them moderate their communities and their comment sections and all of the awfulness that you can imagine a news site having in there, that it's true. And thankfully, we now have software and tons of good regulation that helps protect those comment areas. But before the users who, if you go to the comment site and you're like, oh my God, that comment section is awful, imagine what the moderators are seeing before you get that cleaned up version of what you're seeing as just an average user going to that site. So making sure that those moderators and those policy people, the brand managers, those people are getting what they need in order to do their job correctly and have the expectations have so they can meet the expectations of their execs is it's kind of like, I don't know. It's one of the favorite parts of my job. I love the operations part, and now I get to, as a consultant, I've been working with different software companies and different brands and things like that. I get to take all of those years and all of those crazy experiences and all of that frontline experience that I've had running all those different departments, and I get to tell them best practices, and I get to tell them, sure, yeah, you could do it that way. You could hire that new 28-year-old as your head of growth. Sure, totally could. They probably haven't seen too much. They probably have just read all the blogs and done all the things, and they're probably great. And I was that 28-year-old phenom at a time, and so you should give them a chance. But you could probably hire 2 or 3 other people to kind of get that team going, or you could hire someone with a lot more kind of wide-ranging experience, and that can help out too. And the Gen X thing, when it comes down to operations, I think is an interesting topic because we're not thought of as operations people because of the point in our career that we're at. We're usually thought of as more kind of like mentors and directors and managers
Hmm.
and not doers. But we know how to do stuff really well. So if you have a Gen Xer applying for a doer position, don't discount it just because of their like long resume. Like you should probably.
That's so huge. That's so huge. And again, thank you to those who reached out. And I've had many confidential, non-live talks, obviously, about this Gen X thing that we're, trying to make more prominent. I find people have that problem, meaning the resume has vice president of this, director of that, head of this team, and they're applying for a doer job, but they're not even getting the interview because they look like they're not a doer. So
Hmm.
it's something to be said for how do you redo the resume and, reach out to that hiring manager to say, I'm a doer. I want to do the thing. I don't want to just pontificate and tell people to put these decks together for me. Because I think pontificating had a role at some point, but I think all companies now, given the economy and given the automation and how much AI can do, they need smart doers and smart thinkers. And then you also said something that I think is important. There are so many amazing 28, 29, 26-year-old phenoms, 100%. But there is something there about having the time in the boardroom, even if it's hybrid, understanding psychology, understanding people, understanding how to react to different situations, understanding when something is not a red flag, it's a yellow flag, how to keep your cool. That truly does come with time. And there's so many Gen Xers with that skill set built in that systematically know how to build the system if something was to go awry, then maybe that 28-year-old can be like a key player and take over that role in a few years, but it may not be there yet. And I think sometimes that's also a tricky situation because you're not trying to say that person, to your point, you said it really well, doesn't have the potential to do the thing. But if you need something ramped up now with folks who know how to just rock it out, you might want to reconsider the way that you hire. And when I see so many managerial or senior positions within the digital marketing space in general, it is really interesting to find that you don't see too many seasoned doers in those functions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate. The other point, the other, darker side of the Gen X, because as we said, you and I are kind of more on that cusp side.
Yeah.
As they've now talked about Gen X more, they're making it more and more defined that I am solidly Gen X and not, not, there's no confusion around me being a millennial. But I was just talking about this with someone the other day. I'm seeing people on the other end of the Gen X who are maybe cuspers with boomers who would never identify themselves as a boomer, definitely would identify themselves as a cusper. And like the world was different when they were coming up. And
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot more anger from them, a lot more grizzled, and a lot
Yep.
their mentors were mean. Their mentors didn't have a lot of empathy, and they've adopted some of those things. And I've had some like moments with people who are, 10, 15 years older than me, still in my cohort, probably have a very similar resume. And they have these like chest brandishing moments where they're like, what are you going to do?
Yes.
Kind of moments. And you're like, what do you stop it? like
Yes.
you, we
Yes.
there are plenty of books out there that show you that you don't have to do that. And I can tell you from personal experience and as a parent, you don't have to do that. Like one of the things that we used to tell our kids all the time are like, do we yell ever? Do we ever yell? If we don't yell, you probably don't need to yell either. There's probably a way to get across your point, express your frustration, you know, make any kind of like argument that you're doing without yelling. Like you don't have to yell. And I feel like I have to have that same coaching talk with, upper management sometimes because they were, brought in on some rough stuff and they're having a really hard time. Those specifically, those Gen Xers, those a little bit older Gen Xers are having a hard time because that worked in the past, that fear tactic, that
Yes.
that intimidation management style worked back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. And it is not working with the new generations. They're like, I will leave. I do not have to be here. Like
Yes.
I can say that to them because like I'm like, I know my worth. I can go somewhere else. If this is how you would like to run your team, cool, you can do it without me. But the younger people don't even have like that backup that I do of like having that experience. And they're saying like you can't talk to me like that. Like you can't do that. And I find that an interesting development that's happening lately now, especially if you're talking about generations.
I have memories of, and I won't name the company I'm at because we get along great now, but someone who used to be my boss, I remember My maiden name was Stefanovsky. And when we were working on something, I remember hearing from my open cubicle down the hall from their office, Stefanovsky, my office, now! And it felt like I was in, the Bob Newhart show. No, 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 no. The Mary Tyler Moore show. And what's his name? Ed Asner, right? He was the boss, was in his room and yelled at Mary to come in. And she's like, oh, whatever. What was his last name? And now I have to figure out his last name.
That's an older reference than you and I, just so you know. That's
I know, but I know that you and I would know it because we grew up with the same TV channels. There was no other option. That's what was on at 3:00 after Little Rascals. So let's switch gears a bit, but not really, because you talked about some things with your experience, and TrustCon is coming up, and we worked at Mod Squad together where there was a boatload of moderation, global moderation. Obviously, things have changed where it's gotten even more complex. And before we go into the complexity and the nuances of software technology, human moderation, I do have to say that it is amazing for me to think that when we saw the beginning of the internet and websites and www and Netscape and Yahoo and Alta Vista, I never, and this is not me being naive, I'm being real, never would have thought that text and online comments on websites and social platforms could be so wicked, so wicked, and influence and be so hurtful to anybody. I just had no idea that we were that was coming for the world. And some of it's positive and great. Emojis, like, I'm not gonna lie, when emojis first launched, I was like, really? But I communicate with my daughter through emojis, and it's great. So fast forward to now, we have AI, we have robots, we have bots, all the things when they say the bots are following you. What are you seeing with content moderation and the speed of spam?
Spam is actually one of the leading reasons, spam and porn make the tech world innovate. And so things like, I don't want to talk about porn. So we'll talk about spam. Spam is one of the reasons that the AI models, why they iterate on it. And like every advancement in detection of text, specifically material, but then also the image and video innovations that we're seeing as well start with spam, because and so I'm very excited about the advancements in large language models and artificial intelligence and natural language processing, and how we can leverage those for specifically moderation, but scanning of content and helping us scale to the levels that we want to, and that the mass market expects that we're at. Being someone who has been in, again, trust and safety now, but moderation for all of these years. I mean, my first job in this industry was as a part-time job on the weekend as a chat monitor for a kids' chat room. And we didn't have tech. We had humans sitting in chat rooms, babysitting kids, reading all the things. And that's what we did. I had 2 chat rooms and I had 50 kids in each room. And I was just like reading back and forth. And that's what we were doing back then. And I remember standing in line hilariously for a Jerry Springer show with my swear list and updating my swear list of all the things that we can scan the exact word filter words back then. So very ironic kind of spirit there. Exactly. It was a traumatizing show overall. But that was how I walked in. I remember standing in line,
hilarious,
and working at that time. But the tech has really helped us. Now you got to be realistic when it comes to the tech. A lot of these software companies promise, basically lying to their customers on what they can achieve with these AI models. Again, I am very excited and optimistic, which is unlike me in most other areas of my life. But as far as tech goes, I'm very optimistic about the capabilities that artificial intelligence and LLMs can add to specifically moderation work. what I'm not happy about is how we are lying to people, telling them that like they're foolproof, they're correct. You can cut out all of your human moderation oversight because the precision and recall on these models are perfect and they're exactly where they need to be. That is not true. My God, there's so many companies telling you like, oh, we got this. Like you can cut out all your human
Is that
moderation and
really
cut your
happening
costs
right
by
now?
80, 90% because we have these robots that are going to come in and scan all this stuff for you. Now, even if that was true, even if the precision and recall on these models were to a point where you could like say that they're correct all of these times, which is not true. But even if that was true, it does not take into account brand dynamics and how every individual brand has an ethos and a vibe that they're trying to captivate their audiences with. If we use news sites as an example, I can say I'm putting an LLM, all bunch of models that are going to analyze the comment section on these news sites. You are not telling me that a Newsmax and a New York Times are going to have the same
Mm-hmm.
brand guidelines. You're going to have to tune those models to the way that those different brands are. And it's the same things with even the two kids brands. You have a kids brand that's more snarky and you've got a kids brand that's more, bluey, and you like every brand has their own dynamic that they need to be able to capture. And the models that are released are generic models. Now they're generic models for toxicity, or they're
Right.
generic models for, humanity and that sort of thing. But like what level of toxicity is okay for your snarky teen brand as opposed to your peace site, as opposed to your, like every brand has different dynamics. So you still need humans, brand managers, people who can be community managers, who can kind of get what the vibe of that brand is, and then understand enough about the tech that they can then tune the models accordingly. But then also you need to then test the models to do that. So there's all this amazing cool tech happening, but there are so many human jobs attached to this new tech that's out there, that it's not just this like, woohoo, we're going to turn this on and we don't have to have humans anymore. It's like asinine to think that that's the way that it's going to go. Mm-hmm.
So, without naming names, because we don't do that here, but can you? Are there verticals or industries where you're seeing a trend of that? Of we don't need the people, because what you're describing to me is essentially you need someone to fly the plane. You need someone to fly the plane, control the robots, if you, because there's this thing with AI
Well,
about you need to either be a great prompter, okay, but you also need to know how to fly the plane or control the
it's all of them.
robots.
I
Are there
love the
specific
metaphor, and
industries
I
or verticals
love
you're seeing
any
where they're
metaphor.
trying to cut
So
off that
they're hiring
human
only the
element?
pilot. They're not hiring, if they hire anyone, they're like, woohoo, we're going to do this. We're going to hire the pilot. You need the mechanics. You need the flight attendants. You need the people refueling the plane. You need the people putting the baggage. Things that you need all of those other people. If you just say, no, we got a pilot, they'll take care of all that stuff. Why do we need any of
Mm-hmm.
those other people? Then that pilot is either going to say, no, absolutely not, I'm not doing that. Or they'll be like me and be like, sure, I'll do everything. And then they're like frazzled and like burnt out and like, kind of twitchy whenever they do stuff. And so if we get away from the pilot analogy, what's happening at these companies, and it's unfortunately all verticals. Some verticals are a little bit more, especially when it comes to audience engagement, that are a little bit more
Wow.
seasoned and understand the value of audience engagement a little bit more. So like video games, for example, they're always at the forefront of kind of pushing the narrative and the boundaries of what we do as far as audience engagement. But there's always room to grow there. Like news publishing, and publishers in general, just like kind of publications who have like realized that print is hurting, and so they've gone to their digital, and now that they've gone to digital, they've realized that they should engage with the
Mm-hmm.
audiences there, and it's not just like the old let's just go to Facebook, let's just go to Twitter. They're making sometimes walled gardens, but tending their own garden audience. Which one?
Like in whatchamacallit,
Discord.
starts with the D.
So yeah, so
Starts with the D. Server.
there's So there's
Thank you,
areas that
Discord.
people are obviously are still going. They're still going to those like social media sites. They're making Discord servers and that sort of thing. And you can engage with them there. But now that the brands are like, we want to be part of the conversation. So whether that brand decides that they want to be part of the conversation in their fans made Discord server or in their fans made Facebook, I guess, if they have an older audience, or like the different, they have like an Instagram kind of feed for that. Whether they want to do that or they want to make their own feeds in those areas, a lot of them are choosing to do their own sites again, depending on how big their audience is. I would still argue if you're a small brand, don't start your own thing. If you're your own brand, if you're a large brand and you have a large audience, either join a fan community that's already there, or go to one of the bigger, huge social media sites and kind of engage and those kind of things. But regardless, wherever it is, whether you're joining an established community, whether you're making a community in that social media site, whether you're making it in-house and doing that, you've decided that audience engagement and you engaging with the audience engagement is an important part of your brand. Invest in it at the level that you need to. If they come back to you and say, moderation is going to cost this 5-figure amount a month, and that this is what we're going to need to do in order to protect the users or to protect the brand or both, make sure that this new threat is not going to come into our community. Figure out how to do that, because that's part of audience engagement. Don't just say like, nope, we can't invest that much money there. We audience engagement costs money, and it costs money to protect the users, and it costs money to protect the brand. And like, people need to add it to their budget and add that into their budget. And it's not just like, I'm going to pop this new AI solution on and then I don't have to have people to maintain it. Like, they have to invest in the tech, they have to invest in the humans, and not just be like, I'm going to have this wonderkind 27-year-old who said that they can do everything. They have like, 1 million followers on TikTok, so I bet they can manage my community and I don't have to hire anybody else for it. Like, gone are those days. Like, you need to actually treat it like an actual department. You like, your customers are expecting it, and so you need to, and you need to put those you need to put the dollars in the budget toward that stuff and commit to it.
And I love this happened in our call. You essentially, if you're watching this an hour later, Joy just put together a skeleton, if you will, of how small and big brands should think about moderation. And AI is lovely. Woohoo, we both love the AI, but you still need people to run it. And I still see, posts all the time, even for big brands, seeking community manager. It's never, head of community management or community manager specialist. So there's other categories of management. It's just one person. I think in this day and age, as advancements have come to play and there's more noise and more things competing, how in the world is big brand X
and that
thinking they're the cat's meow with,
they're supposed to be a graphic designer, they're supposed to be a copywriter, they're supposed to be a brand manager, they're supposed to be an escalations person. So like, if something awful happens, God forbid, and they have to actually like involve law enforcement, they got to manage all of that too. They got to rewrite policy. Like, I mean, and again, as someone who's been like, I can do it all, I can be there, like, it's got to stop. Like, people have to stop realizing that like these unicorns that you keep having is not sustainable, and it's not a good idea for your brand, because they're gonna get burnt out and they're gonna leave if you do find someone to say yes. Which again, I've been that person who said yes, and I 2020 hindsight, but they need to invest in it. Like, you wouldn't have like a call center that has,
and that's why I might go a little deep here and a little bit, too deep, but I'm going to go there. You and I both like looking at trends and both like, talking about trends, or, we'd call each other all the time or text each other. I can't even remember how many times. Did you read this? I saw this. This is going to happen. Da, 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 da. So I'm going to bring it back to this piece of the conversation, but I want to start at the pandemic. There was overhiring. So the tech companies hired like crazy. Great. Awesome. They hired like crazy. Then they realized, oh, shoot, we overshot our numbers for growth, especially in e-com. Folks start going away. I know the big news was in Shopify also started, laying off people. But we also know that many of those companies, bottom lines, could have supported and kept those people in house at those jobs. But it goes back to shareholder value. We know that. Big uproar in hiring. Who psych, don't need folks anymore. Okay, fine. Nobody was Nostradamus, but I did still think, and I remember watching it, telling my husband, this is going to explode. There was so much hiring. There wasn't even the way that they were scenario planning. You have like Stanford business school students and Palo Alto like phenoms. I'm sorry, I'll just say it's just horrible planning. Okay, fine. You have that going on. Let's keep shareholder value going. Cool. All right. Then let's go back to the job market you and I talked about at the beginning of this conversation. Then you have folks who may be in that cusper Gen X vibe age group who may have all the skill sets you just said, but aren't in those positions at the companies to educate senior leaders of what is needed, like you just said is needed. You may not have the people at the companies right now with the experience or the knowledge to know what needs to be staffed to push back on higher decision makers, because everyone, and I've said this back from my Motorola days, love you Moto, but I remember some of those moments. Everything I did was about one box in a spreadsheet. What was that bottom line? What was my ROI? What was the percent uptick, downtick, whatever it may be? And my concern is that, yes, we're talking about community management, a very important topic in business, but we could almost talk about any topic whereby the people who could be making the decisions and also doing good education and pushback internally aren't even there, or may not be listened to because there aren't enough of them, because there's so many layers of perhaps somebody who's ready for the next position in their career. Or let's be honest, and this isn't even a political, has a phenomenal package of some sort whereby their salary, their compensation is based on stockholder value and whatever. That does trickle down to what we're talking about of having an organization, whether it's small or a big entity like Pepsi or Coke, staffed properly in every single department to make those decisions. Scott Monty was on, I know you know Scott, a while ago, and what he does is he actually counsels companies to help leaders who might be younger leaders, helping counsel like what does it mean to run an organization and to merge both generations together. So Scott had said, as Gen Xers, we can look up, see what's needed to manage up accordingly, provide that value and education. We also have the wherewithal to look down, mentor, teach. It is that sandwich generation of awesome, but aren't many of us who are there as much anymore. So going back to what you said, you've got someone who might think, genius, we're going to bring in CM, community management, to the company, check. And you're setting up that person for failure at jump. Mm-hmm. Sure. Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like I don't want to equate it to, but to me sometimes it's not a drug per se, but it fills me up when I have a challenge, something I'm solving or something I'm launching for somebody or helping somebody with, expanding their own product or their own presence, and I see the cause and effect. That gives me such a high, because I always joke and say, I'm touching my iMac. I can figure it out in this box. Give me some time and this box and I will figure it out. And that makes me happy. So I hear what you're saying, where, money's money, you do need the money, and that keeps me going. But I prefer to work on different projects and problem solve that way. And who knows? Who knows what'll come around the corner. But until that happens, I just enjoy staying active that way. We talked quite a bit about social media and content and kids and what have you. And you may have seen, it's been in the press. It's a best-selling book right now, Jonathan Haidt, about the anxious generation. I think he's over at, is he at Stern? He might be at Stern with Scott Galloway. I think he was over at NYU, but he just wrote this book about cell phones, the anxious generation. I've not read it. I have friends who are reading it. They say they love it. And we've also talked about this because of your background, being parents and the approach you take to technology and phones. So we have limits on our phones for the kids. The girl is older, so she's able to really better manage her time on her device. But with our son, he had a flip phone for a while, 100%. He was texting like it was 1997. But we found for him, it was really difficult for him to communicate because of just this and challenges he was going through. So we got him a smartphone, got him a really basic Android, and that was tricky because that thing we limit it to 2 hours a day tops across the board, gaming, everything, and it's still a fight. What are you? Then I also, on my daughter's phone, I shut the Wi-Fi off with my device so they don't have Wi-Fi to their devices. I'll go into the router and shut it off. What are your thoughts on this anxious generation theme? Do you think it's been here for a while and it's kind of like we've always known about it? Why do you think it's getting such prominence now? I mean, the Social Dilemma documentary had come out. You would have thought you would learned your lesson then to understand technology and what kids are using. Why do you think it's out now? Why do you think it's more of a talking point? So old now, right? Yeah, totally. Yeah. That's yes. You go. You're good. Yep, we're good. Yes, right. No, 100%. Like so the younger one, he's 11, and so we know that the longer he stays on, he doesn't engage or go outside. Or it's just because to your point, all the games that he plays, I've played them. It's a lot of just shaped games, and they're safe under 12 games. But when he's on it, and then he just will not listen, he forgets to do things. We'll just say, okay, you can only handle 2 hours at a time because you're not doing anything else. Now he also has a VR. Well, not a VR. He has, what's it called? We call it the VR, but I can't think of it now. The MetaQuest. So when he goes in there, he has a great time. And then we limit chat now and then because we notice when chat is on, he gets more extreme and aggressive in how he talks. I'm like, okay, bro, nope, that's not happening. And we'll talk about why. He notices it too. Yes, he notices it too. But being a yes, but being a boy, and I'm not saying just a boy girl thing, but it does sometimes take more for him to realize. Did you hear yourself when you were on that? Or after you finished playing that game and you went to get a glass of water, like he legit last week broke a glass because he finished his game on his device. He finished the level, quickly ran to get a glass, did it so fast it broke. And I said, look, this is why we have to limit. Now, the older one, she's 14 and a half. She doesn't have a limit on the phone itself during the day. But I do watch how long she spends on certain apps. And so the other day I said, you spent 2.5 hours on YouTube. Why? Like what? And then she's like, well, I saw this and that, and there's a Taylor Swift video. So I actually go through with her to see what she watched because, it's TikTok. She doesn't have TikTok, but there's YouTube shorts. So same thing in a sense. But you're right. That's happened. That's happened along those lines. Yes, it's happened. I've done that. I've dealt with my daughter because, we're the same person. So we debate the same. We plan ahead the same. I can tell what 3 steps she's doing to win the conversation. So I've had to completely change. It sucks. It does. It actually sucks. I have to change the way I talk to her completely. But that was really helpful advice. So thanks for that. I think the takeaway there is, if you're watching now or later, of anxiety is here, but are we looking at ourselves with how we parent, the time we're taking, spending time with the kids, and having the open conversations about why they're watching what they're watching, or what are they into, what games are they playing, play a role and have that interest versus it being so taboo. And with that, that was awesome, Joy. Thank you for joining me. And for those of us who are watching live, Izzy, if you're still watching, hi. We will have this up later at some point. And everyone have a great rest of your week. Joy, thank you so much. Bye.
Subscribe and say hi.